Will there be a trade deal between the United States and South Korea? Plus an update on North Korea, all on the Impossible State next.
North Korea is the impossible state. It's a place that stumped leaders and policymakers for more than 3 decades. It has a complex history, and it has become one of the United States' top national security priorities. Each week on this show, we'll talk to the people who know the most about North Korea.
Welcome to another episode of the Impossible State podcast at CSIS. My name is Victor Cha, President of Geopolitics and Foreign Policy at CSIS and Korea Chair, Professor at Georgetown. And this, I guess, will be our last episode before the summer break. We usually take a break in August. I'm joined today by Sid Seiler, who I will introduce in a moment. But I just want to take a minute to say something, not good news for our viewers. CSIS suffered a terrible loss in the last week with the passing of Andrew Schwartz, who was our Senior Vice President for External Relations. Wonderful person, a terrific colleague, only 56 years old. The Impossible State podcast was actually Andrew Schwartz's idea. He was the one who thought of the idea, taking the title of my book on North Korea and saying, hey, we should do a podcast about North Korea. So it's a terrible loss for CSIS, a personal loss for myself. Andrew is a wonderful human being, a larger-than-life figure here at CSIS, and really the father of this particular podcast. So Andrew, we miss you very much and hope your family are well. But today's conversation is about U.S. South Korea trade. That's a big issue this week in D.C., but also there are things going on with North Korea. There are always things going on with North Korea, which we certainly cannot ignore. And joining me today is someone who is very familiar to all of you, good friend of the podcast, good friend of CSIS, good friend of the Korea Chair, Sid Seiler. Sid Seiler is a senior advisor, non-resident senior advisor in the Korea Chair and in our geopolitics department. He was a national intelligence officer for North Korea from 2020 to 2023. Previously, he was the U.S. Forces Korea senior analyst and senior defense intelligence expert for North Korea. He was senior envoy or special envoy for the six-party talks. He was director on the National Security Council, probably the person with the senior most combination of intelligence and policy experience on North Korea. And so we're very glad, always happy to have him as a regular, semi-regular on the podcast. And there's plenty to discuss. So Sid, thanks again for taking time off from your summer to be with us today.
Victor, thank you for the invitation and the kind introduction.
Sure, of course, my pleasure. So I wanted to start out talking a little bit about the trade picture. I mean, this week, the big news was Japan. But there was a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff going on with Korea. Wee Sung-lak, the National Security Advisor, was in town in the early part of the week. This was a follow-up from his meeting with Marco Rubio about 2 weeks ago. And clearly the focus is on trying to get a trade deal. I think he carried a letter that sort of had the outlines of a framework of a deal. But I mean, Sid, let me just ask you first, I mean, you're not the trade guys. We're not the Trade Guys podcast, but just in your sort of look at the alliance, how do you see the sort of the trade part of this figuring more broadly in alliance dynamics right now?
Well, if you look at the U.S.-ROK relationship over the years, there's been trade has always been an important issue, and in the past, we typically sought to find win-win situations. understanding that the strength of the alliance in the political and diplomatic and economic realms also contributed greatly to the strength of our security alliance and the message that it sent to North Korea and other adversaries that the U.S. ROK relationship is indeed ironclad and strong. We've had irritants in the trade arena before. You and I have lived through everything from mad cow disease scare to Apple challenges over Apple exports but beginning with in particular the free trade agreement, just a remarkable breakthrough in terms of kind of an equitable relationship for both sides that both sides benefit from. And now that we're going through a period of examining that, people are kind of pointing towards the unpredictability or unreliability of the United States. I say the fact that we're able to work through this, and I'm confident we'll get some type of deal, kind of shows the resiliency of the alliance across the board, and part of that being, the trade relationship between our two countries.
The clock is really ticking. I mean, they have until August 1st to try to make some sort of agreement while the pause on the sanctions, the tariffs are still in place. And of course, there was, while the National Security Advisor either was here or was on his way out, there was this announcement of a new deal with Japan, 15% tariffs, investment, some things on rice also, the commitment to purchase more rice from the United States. I think, this puts a lot of pressure on the South Korean government, right? I mean, they are trying to look for a deal that will not just be about tariffs and non-tariff barriers, but they're also, I think, looking at other things, maybe shipbuilding, maybe energy. Energy was also something the Japanese said that they would look at, Alaska LNG. But I think there's a lot of pressure now on the South Koreans because, they've got to get a deal that's as good as Japan, right? It's got to be as good, if not better than Japan's. They don't have a lot of time.
Right.
Lee Sung-lak was just here. The new foreign minister's in place now, right? And so they'll probably send a delegation. There's probably one on the plane, or it's already landing in D.C. now to negotiate this. But, I mean, bureaucratically, though, it's harder, right? If the South Koreans are thinking about a deal that is not just about tariffs and non-tariff barriers, but that could also include something on shipbuilding or something on energy, coordinating that, as you know well, from the U.S. side, but also dealing with the South Koreans. This is not just a trade ministry negotiation, right?
It's got a lot of varied interest in it. And you said, when we talk about these areas, AI in particular, and shipbuilding, you see opportunities for expansion of the relationship in a way that reflects the important partnership and the growth of South Korea and its importance to the United States in these two as well as other sectors. I think the other thing everybody should remember is August 1st is a deadline, but it's a soft deadline in that whatever is decided by August 1st is not the end of the discussion. And so working out the details, particularly in the areas that you discussed, it will be a protracted period. And, this is what negotiators get paid for. It's not easy, it's hard. And the fact that it's hard means it's serious. And that's, I think, a good sign.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I certainly don't expect that if they're able to announce something by August 1st, that it's going to be sort of a, on paper, completely detailed agreement. This, I think the goal is just to get some sort of framework in place that President Trump can announce, and then say leave it to the negotiators to work out the details and maybe get something fully done by APEC, right, at the end of October, when President Trump would come to Korea, hopefully would come to Korea. But let me ask you, as we know well, Trump and Lee Jae-myung, the new president of South Korea, have not met yet. They missed an opportunity in Canada at the G7. They theoretically missed another opportunity at The Hague in NATO because the South Koreans decided not to come, or President Lee at least didn't go. How do you see a potential summit meeting between Trump and Lee fitting into this whole trade negotiation?
Yeah, I think it'll be an important event. People need to understand that not every summit is, primarily focused on generating a large number of agreements on a large number of big issues. These agreements are usually the result of a process at lower levels that worked their way up. And the summit kind of seals the deal, but also there is an important symbolic dimension to summits. It's where the symbolism becomes a substance. And there's no such thing as a wasted, summit when these two leaders get to meet. It demonstrates to audiences both in the United States and Korea the closeness of the personal relationship. And as our bilateral relationships, particularly in Asia, have a strong personal dimension. And so I think it'll lay the groundwork for assuring, I think, the people of the Republic of Korea that Donald Trump and Myung can have a good relationship that will allow these two countries to address the whole range of issues, both from trade all the way up to a non-denuclearizing North Korea as partners. And so, hopefully we'll see that type of meeting take place. And I think there'll be sufficient progress on the negotiations. It's not a high bar. Mm-hmm. It's not, we've got to meet this level before it's worth the two leaders meeting. I think there will need to be some type of agreement announced, but it need not be the perfect end state agreement.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think that's right, that they, some sort of framework that's about, certainly about U.S. tariffs, mm-hmm. which I can't imagine it's going to go lower than 15%. I mean, I think that number was kind of sets the bar.
That's the new magic number,
yeah,
right?
That's the new magic number now. But like on the Korean side, probably, certainly things on non-tariff barriers. I mean, there could be things on cost sharing. We don't know, right?
Right.
New areas of cooperation like shipbuilding, LNG. But like you said, it's a framework. It wouldn't be all detailed so that Trump could announce it and then say, oh, yes, and like my good friend President Lee will be coming to Washington, sometime this summer or something like that. I mean, you probably agree. I mean, I think their goal is at least in 2025, since the new government was elected in Seoul, there should be at least two meetings between the leaders, right? Once with Lee coming to the U.S., which is customary for a new South Korean president. Correct. And then the other opportunity would be Lee hosting President Trump on the sidelines of APEC, right, in the fall. So do you remember, I mean, when you were on the NSC, you remember whenever there was a summit, arranging those things with the South Korean side, right?
I did 4 of them, two in Seoul and 2 in Washington. Memorable experiences.
Yeah, a lot of work.
A lot of work. And, a lot of effort. And it is that effort that goes into the summit itself, and then the effort, obviously, that in implementing what's agreed to at the summit,
right.
where the real work is.
So this was... So that was Obama and Park
Obama
Geun-hye?
Myung Bak twice, Obama Park Geun-hye twice.
Did you do the Camp David one with?
No, did not.
Oh, Myung Bak?
Yeah.
That was Myung Bak, right?
Right.
Yeah. So 2 Myung Bak, 2 Park Geun-hye.
Correct.
Yeah, I did No Hyun. I had a bunch with No Hyun. So, how do you think Lee and Trump will get along?
I think they'll get along. I think there'll be some mutual respect for two battle-hardened, politicians who got to their respective offices with a lot of challenges from the outside. I think Myung carries himself with a degree of, like a statesman who would be willing to sit down with Donald Trump, kind of respond to the charismatic, I'm in charge like posture of President Trump when he negotiates, and I think President Lee can respond to that and be able to demonstrate to his audience at home that he sat down with the President of the United States as two leaders of two great countries. So I think the chemistry will be there. It will be a first meeting. And there's a lot of lessons learned from past first meetings that didn't always go well because the two leaders didn't really fully take into account the other's thoughts and and postures and positions on the various issues between our countries. I think in this case, President Yi brings a lot of experience in dealing with U.S. issues and is well informed of the type of negotiator and counterpart Donald Trump is. And so I think they'll be well prepared for a successful summit.
Yeah, there's been as you said, you referenced, there's been a history of first meetings between progressive leaders or presidents representing progressive parties in South Korea and Republican presidents. Kim Dae-jung, George W. Bush.
The first one comes to mind,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. No Moo-hyun, George W. Bush. I was there for all of those. But arguably, this particular pairing doesn't fall into that category because President Lee isn't sort of your typical progressive president, and President Trump is definitely not your typical Republican president. So it could be a very different dynamic. So
exactly.
Yeah. Great. Let's move to the next segment and talk about North Korea. I know this is one of your favorite topics. You were just at a conference in New York, right? A big North Korea conference in New York, and you can talk about your insights from some of that. But so I guess let's start at the top. Trump-Kim, right? How interested is Trump in doing this again? How interested is Kim in doing this again?
My own sense is, I remind people this is not 2018. So in 2018, we had just gone through a tumultuous year of multiple missile launches, accusations thrown back and forth with Pyongyang. My button's bigger than your button. You're going to feel the full fire and fury of the likes of which the world has never seen. And kind of an urgency to sit down with North Korea and respond to some of the overtures they made in the beginning of the year, pegged to the Winter Olympics, but also kind of at the end of their missile R&D campaign, wanting to pivot to diplomacy to mitigate pressure. And so when the opportunity came to meet in Singapore, it was from President Trump's perspective, being an unorthodox, non-traditional, you got to sit down and talk to your adversaries type of guy. It was an environment ripe for the meeting that was held in Singapore and then subsequently in Hanoi. Since then, though, President Trump has the experience of Hanoi, the failure of Kim Jong-un to take advantage of the forward momentum that had been gained between Singapore and Hanoi, and his subsequent walking away essentially from talks, even before COVID made diplomacy difficult. You have the history of Kim not coming to the table to be a serious negotiator at Hanoi, and of course, the hundreds of missile launches and the nuclear tests that well, there's been no nuclear tests since then, but a lot of launches from particularly SRBM, short-range ballistic missiles, all the way up to intercontinental ballistic missiles. A declaration of the permanent division of the two Koreas, and North Korea's own proclamation, it's not interested in dialogue with people who refuse to respect their sovereignty. And that's defined for them as for countries that are unwilling to accept their nuclear weapons status. They don't need the sanctions relief. They don't really need anything from them. And there's a sense in which that is all kind of being proven right now, in particular with Vladimir lowering the bar, Vladimir Putin. The comments over the weekend from past week from visiting Foreign Minister Lavrov that the Russians understand the reasons why North Korea is pursuing nuclear development. In other words, Russia's tacit recognition that North Korea is a legitimate nuclear power. All this makes a different environment for whether the president, how much the president is going to pursue a meeting with Kim Jong-un. We have heard, as you have, right, that some initial efforts have been made and North Korea has been non-responsive. Hopefully that does not remain the same. There's a unique opportunity here for President Trump and President Lee Jae-myung to craft out maybe a coordinated approach to North Korea. They're both facing the same high hurdles. Kim has said he doesn't want to talk to the South. Kim has said he doesn't want to talk to the U.S. And so there's only a certain degree to which you would want to even chase or risk appearing to be chasing, repeatedly asking for meetings that you know are going to be rejected. I think President Trump will be flexible. I think both the teams in Seoul and Washington would be responsive. The bar is not that high. If Kim simply wanted to meet, maybe at APEC like it's being discussed, and even if that's unrealistic in a third country, I think both leaders, Myung obviously, but even President Trump, would be responsive to that type of request. That said, it's highly likely to be a summit that would deliver much on the denuclearization side, because Kim has essentially said denuclearization is no longer a legitimate topic for discussion. So it's a way of hedging to say, I really don't think a meeting will happen, but if it happens, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. And I mean, the Russians, so like you said, they basically accepted North Korea as a nuclear weapon state. They have stated publicly they understand the rationale for North Korea pursuing these weapons. They've effectively broken down the UN Security Council sanctions regime, haven't they?
And that's why, this is not so much a question of whether the Russia-North Korea relationship is tactical and transactional and likely to go away if there's peace in Ukraine, which is what you hear from some people who are skeptical that this is a longer-term strategic development. But because of what has happened, I mean, Lavrov pronouncing, officially Russia's tolerance of a nuclear North Korea, Russia's behavior in inviting not only the troops and the equipment in, but, workers. And I'm sure even if there's peace in Ukraine, we'll still have North Korea workers going into Russia. So effectively, now there's a strategic relationship. Maybe it's not your sum of all fears scenario of, the crink of Chinese, Russians, Iranians, North Koreans all sitting in a world. It's all sitting around the table trying to figure out how to upend the world. But it is going to be something that we'll have to deal with for the longer term. And it does provide a political and economic and even security lifeline to North Korea that will prove to be an impediment to incentivizing North Korea to come back to the table to talk about the issues we want them to talk about.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think when we look at this is an example of a relationship, DPRK Russia, that at least I think it started out as something purely tactical and transactional, and then transformed into something strategic as each leader saw like there's much more they can gain out of this very transactional, munitions for cash or oil relationship. It really has, blossomed in quotation marks into something that has been very strategic, both for Kim and Putin.
It's probably because the initial approaches from Russia for material help and aid had a degree of urgency and transactionalism to them.
Right.
And as the decision-making process took place, how much to ask for, how much to give, how much to tolerate, how much to go public with it, both leaders saw increasing value to kind of making this more strategic, more public. Mm-hmm. Remember, at first there was total denial. Later on, now we have photos of flag-draped coffins returning from the battlefront. Nothing to hide here. So I think, for those who wanted the definitive answer in the first few months, there was probably those who said it was transactional, those who said strategic. At this point in time, it's hard to believe this would all fall apart if suddenly there was some magical breakthrough in Ukraine and the war ended.
Right, right. Let me ask you two related questions, but they're two different questions. You mentioned how they initially they didn't talk about this. They denied that this was taking place, but now they talk about it as a victory, right? A national victory. And then these pictures of the coffins coming home, draped in the North Korean flag, Kim Jong-un standing over them on the tarmac. But in that picture, there was also the daughter.
Right.
So I want to ask you, that's the first thing. I want to ask you about the daughter. Like she's showing up a lot more in pictures. I did like a hit for NBC about this too. Like there's a lot of at least media interest in this now, and I wanted to get your thought on that. And then the second thing I wanted to get your thought on was I guess the new news at the end of this week has been on the South Korean side, the Lee government's decision to stop all broadcasting directed at North Korea. So two questions on North Korea, but they're very different, and I wanted to get your thoughts on both of those.
Well, I said from early on that the DPRK media handling of the daughter of Kim Joo-ae was really pointed strongly in the direction of a succession scenario, and that, you know, perhaps any early thoughts that Kim Yo-jong would be potentially in that process. I think Kim Yo-jong plays a very important role in establishing the legitimacy of a female leader or of an influential individual. I would say Chae Sun-hee as well as foreign minister. These are powerful women in the North Korean context, and that enables the concept of a handover of power to a female. And, you know, obviously Kim Joo-ae is very young, and she will take her years to be ready. But, you know, North Korea pragmatically needs to have, you know, even if there's no apparent problems with Kim Jong-un's health, you know, this is something, as you look at how long they took to roll out Kim Jong-il during the first transition, a little bit less time for Kim Jong-un. Maybe he felt that he needed more time, and so that's why he's moving on having his daughter appear in more of these things. I remember early on, there was some speculation that the appearance was made simply to remind the people that North Korea's nuclear and missile programs were for the children. That if there's any criticism that these are unnecessary expenditures of precious resources on a program that really isn't justified when you look at the external threat, that these are things that will serve North Korea from generation to generation. So I think these both are true. And Kim Joo-ae will eventually inherit this system, and these missiles and nukes will be as important to protect her system as they have been to protect Kim Jong-un. On the ROK actions so far towards North Korea, and a lot of these are reminiscent of what took place during the Moon Jae-in administration. Essentially, if you consider South Korea's statement as it conveyed to then visiting National Security Office Director Chung Eui-young to Pyongyang, that, you know, and that one major commitment says that Kim Jong-un remains committed to the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, and we all know what that means.
Right.
And if the military threat is removed and the stability of our system is guaranteed, we would not need nukes, right? So out there is this concern about stability, concern about the sustainability of this system. And, you know, among the concerns are information flows coming in, efforts by South Korea to send in balloons, to send in broadcasts, to foment a color revolution, as it's termed, peaceful evolution, ideological contamination, and transformation of the North Korea system. These actions at the time of the Moon and Trump administrations were responded to by commitments not to pursue unification, to shut down the loudspeakers, even to curtail the volume on our exercises, to remove all those irritants in the inter-Korea relationship. And this is an effort by, I think, President Lee's team to move preemptively. You know, and we've seen some response by North Korea. Remember, North Korea knows these broadcasts and leaflets, from their perspective, are costly and ineffective. South Korea's work. You know, they're reaching an audience. That's why they irritate North Korea. If they weren't if they had no audience, you would not see the type of response. So this is an effort, I think, by President Lee to make Kim confident that he is not facing a hostile administration in Seoul as he did under President Yoon. Whether they'll yield any result is hard to tell, but and it is regrettable that it essentially says we are not out to challenge the North Korean system. We are out to peacefully survive with them just the way they are. And we're not out to try to transform them. We're not out to seek them. It does, in a way, subordinate human rights, to inter-Korean reconciliation. And to some degree, it also legitimizes a non-denuclearizing North Korea. Although the new administration has said remains committed to denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, the actions it's taking may send Pyongyang the signal that it will succeed in locking in its nuclear weapons status and normalizing relations with countries one by one, and South Korea may be one of those.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like you said, they seem to have this checklist of all of the things that they know irritate the North Koreans: the loudspeakers, the balloon drops, the radio broadcasting, and they're sort of one by one ticking those things off. And basically seeing if they get a reaction, right? I mean, I think
exactly. And if you or I, were in the sit room, kind of looking at the same options, you would be looking at possibility for success versus blowback of failure. And in these cases, the argument's probably made, we are trying to change the thinking of North Koreans, but all this does is antagonize Kim. And we don't know that these balloons work. We don't know who's listening to these broadcast, and if anybody's out there listening to them, it's simply not worth the risk in terms of the escalated tension that they generate. I would find it, to be honest with you, hard to say that these generate the hostile tension and that sometimes they're portrayed as generating. We haven't seen an attack on the balloon line. We see threats of the attack, and farmers and other residents in the area are concerned about it, but the threat is probably overstated. But if you want to remove obstacles and see and probe, this is a good way to probe.
Yeah. The other element of this is there's DPRK Russia, but then there's also the strikes on Iran, and what the state of the relationship is between North Korea and Iran. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that. I don't think we have a full assessment of the nature of the damage that was done to the Iranian nuclear program as a result of this.
Right.
But there are concerns that Iran will look to North Korea for help in reconstituting elements of that. There's a history of cooperation between the two. What are your thoughts on that? What do you think is the likelihood of something like that happening?
Well, I'm not an expert in the Iranian nuclear program, but I would imagine, over the years, whenever there's been talk about nuclear cooperation, both sides have kind of said we can do this without the other. There's been that kind of denial and, maybe a sense of superiority that the Iranian centrifuges are better than the North Korean centrifuges. So, on the one hand, the types of damage done to the Iranian program are areas where North Korea may or may not be able to help them, even if they made the commitment to cross that line. I would also think that, given the dynamics within the CRINC, that China and Russia have been less than forthcoming in helping Iran, with siding with Iran in a meaningful way. In fact, Russia has almost kind of expressed a degree of concern that it would appear to be too closely aligned to Iran, particularly given its relations with Israel. And China just simply not wanting to get into the morass as well. So, the type of North Korea support to reconstitution of the Iranian nuclear program is something we have to watch closely. It's something within the realm of the imaginable, but I think there's a lot of barriers that would have to be overcome.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when we were talking a few weeks ago about the rumors that Iran was seeking to get Nodong missiles, the Hwasong-7 or Shahab-3 kind of, or original missile that led to the Shahab-3. And at that time, there was a discussion that the reason why they had to go to North Korea was because both China and Russia were reluctant to provide open support. And so I think that would be something Pyongyang would have to calculate in terms of how much assistance it would provide to Iran. So nevertheless, this is something I'm sure that, everybody is keeping a close eye on.
If that, like, let's say, and of course, we're both not in government anymore, so we're always willing to talk about hypotheticals,
Right.
Something that we would never do in government when asked by the press. But if there were some sort of cooperation that was taking place that was, more advanced than what might have been the case before the strikes,
Right.
if that cooperation were taking place on Shahab 3 or something, how do you think the Chinese how do you think the Chinese would respond to that? How do you think the Russians would respond to that? Because I have a view on this, but I'd like to hear yours.
At one level, I think both of them would seek to have confidence that Mossad would not allow this to happen. Mm-hmm. That, because the Israelites, Israel would see this early on and take definitive actions with or without U.S., whatever the nature of what it was that was being observed and how you could take it out or halt it. And that it would be everybody's hope that they would be the ones that could discourage it. China and Russia, the beauty of, beauty is too strong a word. The upside of the increased DPRK-Russia cooperation, hopefully, is if Russia sees this and opposes this, they have some leverage. Mm. Historically, this is the type of leverage that Chuche, kind of the Chuche dimension with self-determination, you can help us, but don't tell us what to do, right. Has sought to prevent over the years, and that North Korea would still pursue it. But I think we'd see, those two sides discouraging, because what the U.S. strikes on Iran demonstrate to me President Trump's willingness to act internationally, to not be an isolationist, and to use military force as necessary. And this is not the type of thing that either Beijing or Moscow wants to see. So any actions by Iran that would generate, even more actions from the United States, I think they would seek to try to preempt.
Interesting. I mean, I agree with the general gist of that. I mean, I think the one variant of that I would say is that I think that China would definitely not like it. But I think there's little they could do about it at this point because of the strength of the relationship with Russia. And at the Russian case, they may not be totally in favor of it, but I don't think they would be proactive in terms of trying to regulate North Korean behavior because they're just getting as much as they can out of the relationship. And I don't really sense that they feel any sort of responsibility, if you will, for regulating North Korea. The Chinese do feel some responsibility for regulating North Korean behavior just because of the blowback they get from the West every time the North Koreans do something bad. But you're right. In the end, the Israelis are the ones who have the use of force option on Iran, and they might, in the end, be the one that determine the outcome of all this.
Exactly.
Well, that's great. I think that's all the time that we have for today, Sid. So thanks for coming by and being on The Impossible State. You're always welcome back as one of our regular guests. So it's really great to have you on, and enjoy the rest of your summer.
You too, Victor. Thank you so much.
And to our viewers, I believe that this is our last episode for the summer, and then we take a summer break, and we will be back in September. So everybody enjoy the rest of your summer. Have a great August, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Impossible State.